You spent some time in Beirut, I believe.
That's true, but I'd rather not get into the details of that. I've mentioned it before that I was kidnapped once as a child there, very briefly. It was only less than a day, and I'd really rather not talk about that. But it was a bad experience. I had seen horrible things done to people. I really don't think it's advisable to talk about these kind of things when you cannot explain all the details.
Okay.
You know, the problem with I have to say something. The problem with a lot of people in the media is that they don't understand that simple, succinct, clear, and concise answers are not possible for important questions. And some of these questions require explanations. And I can only say this, that I certainly didn't have anything to do with the Middle East until my mother married somebody from there, and I was taken away from my father from Budapest, Hungary, to live with her for a couple years. So I certainly didn't have an interest in being there, and to be honest with you, I was so happy to get out of there and be back with my father in New York.
Well, there was a terrible war, wasn't there, in Beirut?
I have seen several wars. The first one I actually experienced was when my parents were still together back in 1975, and that was when Numeri's government in Sudan was threatened by the so-called Muslim Brotherhood, And I remember seeing killing right downstairs, right outside our a professor's complex where we lived. We lived in this beautiful area called the Pink Palace in Khartoum, Sudan. And I had seen dead bodies and tanks blowing things up, and just horrible things even then. So that was before I ended up in that terrible city. But I saw even more of it. And, you know, I could never understand how human beings can do this for any reason. It seems so alien to me. All my life, I've never understood why anybody would deliberately want to hurt anybody. I never understood it.
Okay. Matt in Weston-super-Mare has said, seeing as you were in America, have you ever been sued for giving the wrong advice?
No, actually, I'm quite fortunate. I studied some degree of law, although not officially. And in fact, I had at some point an interest in becoming a lawyer, but then I realized that that's not really my cup of tea. I'm more of a philosopher and a writer, intellectual, but not a lawyer. But I studied some law, and I worked, in fact, partly as a paralegal for some actual lawyers in New York. And I learned something, that you have to always qualify what you say and use disclaimers. And so, for example, I should like to right now make one qualifier, that no matter what I say to you on this show tonight, I ask all your viewers to question everything I say. Not a single thing that I say should they take for granted. Although, from my personal point of view, I think I'm speaking perfectly honestly to you.
Okay, well, here's a point then, that somebody's already taking you up on this. Paul in Northumberland says, you're a very clever marketing man, but you have no more wisdom or insight than the next man. How do you respond to that? I
wouldn't totally agree with that. My experience is that people who have actually taken the time to listen to my advice and use it have come back to me and given me feedback and said that it's incredible, you should be making tons of money doing this. You should have a professional life as a psychoanalyst or counselor or something, because you give excellent advice. Wisdom, you know, I was living in Sudan for 2 years with my parents, and we went out to the desert quite often, and incredible places. And imagine, you know, you're on the twilight, and in between night and day, and you see these twinkling stars above you. And it's like from The Little Prince. You know, one of my favorite books is The Little Prince. And I consider it my Bible in a sense, almost, because there's so much wisdom in here. And this was read to me by my father when I was little, especially the original version of the book. This is actually a revised version. Yeah, well, no, I was read in English, the book, although I do speak 6 languages, including French. So wisdom, yeah, I lived in a desert environment. And when you're out there in the middle of the desert, all by yourself, without any food and drink for a couple of days, which happened, and you're that young, you're, what was I, like 11?
Well, you had no
12.
Drink?
Yeah, no, we had a little bit of water left, and I won't say what we did after that, but it wasn't very healthy to do that, but you had to, okay? Yes, there were no plants anywhere that you could take the humidity, the moisture off.
Okay.
So, but or the condensation off. But the thing is that when you're out in the middle of the desert, and you look at, you know, how simple things can be, and you look at the stars, and you think there must be a world out there that's better than ours, throughout all infinity, and I'm convinced the universe is infinite. I don't buy this garbage that there was one single big bang, it all started out of that, and then it'll all go back into that. I don't buy that.
Well, even if you accept the Big Bang Theory, you don't have to accept that it's going to contract. It could just carry on expanding. That's one set of theories.
Yeah, but what are we expanding into? Actually, I don't buy that, because I subscribe to plasma cosmology, and it's a very interesting minority view in physics, which says that what we're seeing, most of it is tired light. The light has become tired. The photons have become tired, and so we're seeing what we see as redshift is really not redshift. It is light that has been traveling for such a long distance that it actually gives us the impression that those stars are heading away from us. Those galaxies are heading away from our galaxy. It is not so. I am convinced, my personal conviction is that the universe is infinite, and maybe there's an infinite number of relatively finite beads of universes. But I can't imagine that there's a point where you reach a barrier and there's a big sign and it says, don't even imagine, don't even think what's beyond this. I'm God. Behave yourself. I don't believe that there's such a sign somewhere and there's an absolute limit. What's behind the sign? What's behind the wall? So it has to be infinite. And if it's infinite, that has a lot of implications, and actually has also a lot of applications philosophically in terms of how we think.
Okay. Well, I mean, there are theories about what's beyond. In other words, you come back to where you start. But we're going to go for a break now. So if you'd like to text in your questions or comments for JP Fenyo, please do so now to 87778 with the word EDGE and then your text. See you back here very soon. Welcome back to On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers, and my special guest, Jean-Pierre Eddie Fenyo. Just before the break, we were talking about the cosmos, the universe, and you were saying that you didn't think if you went in a straight line in any direction, you'd bump into the edge.
Well, you certainly bump into a lot of things like planets, stars, and gaseous, globules of gases and stuff. But you certainly wouldn't reach a point where there's just absolutely nothing beyond that. That's impossible.
Okay. Well, Jim from Larne, which I believe is in Northern Ireland, says, "What's your view on alien life, and have they visited Earth?"
I think it's very possible. I've seen enough circumstantial evidence to think that it would be very strange if we hadn't been visited. My own theory is that there are actual extraterrestrials living inside internal worlds that look like moons from the outside to us. They look like natural moons. But inside these moons is where these aliens are living right now, and they visit our planet from a relatively short distance. They don't have to come from a long distance away. Yes, they originally came from a long distance away. But if they are here, they came at one point millions and millions, hundreds of millions of years ago. And I think that they created, in part, our species. They introduced their genetics into our original primordial ancestors, who were basically these higher primates.
Well, this is like the Zecharia Sitchin thing, isn't it?
In a sense, but basically what I'm saying is that these extraterrestrials are a very advanced species, and because just like an individual goes through birth and youth and then gets older and older and goes through entropy and dies, the same thing happens with an entire species. At some point, a species' life force is weakened because just the genetics cannot cope and the genetic strands get weak.
Like this tired light.
Yes. The universe is full of chaos, but it's also full of order within that chaos. And the most interesting thing that I have realized over time is the idea that as human beings, we cannot really totally appreciate how special life is, how wonderful life can be, and in many ways is. We just don't appreciate it.
Okay, I mean, it's interesting this thing you're talking about hollow moons, because I was having a debate today, funnily enough, on a social website, which I shan't name, with somebody, because there has been evidence that when things strike the moon, it resonates like a bell, and does so for hours. So, do you think possibly the moon is hollow, our moon? It
could be, but I prefer to think that it would be a moon at a further distance, like Titan or something.
What about Iapetus? That's
maybe,
a weird moon,
maybe Europa. Maybe Europa.
Yeah, but Iapetus is that weird one that's half black and half white.
Could be. What I do know is this. I have lived quite a bit of my time in Washington, D.C. In fact, I've lived amongst the most influential and powerful people in the United States, and many people who work at NASA. And I can tell you that a lot of the stuff that we hear about in terms of